what's up? It's Nicole Brewster, also known as Coco. Thank you for tapping into the Elevate Him podcast, where we have tons of topics on how to support our men. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nicole Brewster, also known as Coco, with the Elevate Him show. I am glad to be back and in this seat. It's been a while. We have a lot to talk about today, and I'm super excited to have Merrill.
That's it, the very same.
And he's joining me today to have, some conversations about his experiences and just some mental health issues in men. And we just really want to tap into that and just kind of find our purpose and where we are right now. And of course, as you guys know, Elevate Him, being a nonprofit around men's resources and men's mental health, it's very important for me to break these taboos and to, get through these stigmas so we have a better way of understanding and supporting men specific, because we see the rise in suicide, and it's been for decades 4 times higher than women. And there's just a lot of issues that I really want to bring to the table and make more comfort out of them so we can start healing and getting through things together and support each other better. So thank you so much for coming and
I'm honored.
visiting with me. I've heard so much about you, and I'm just glad you're here. And I just want to hear your story and just kind of your perspective of what you see and what you've gone through personally. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I started life as a blue baby. I was 10 pounds. My mother was 105. I was stuck, and she passed out. And that was the beginning of my traumatic brain injuries. And I lived in a very cloistered Mormon world where no drugs, no alcohol, no sex, no anything exciting except for adrenaline rushes. So I've made my life very complicated with a dozen or more traumatic head injuries that have turned parts of my brain into oatmeal. At the same time, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder in 1987. And in 1974, I began having my first really intense depression. Thought from my Mormon roots that it was because of sin or because of bad thoughts or bad words or bad anything. And for a decade or more, I wrestled with, why am I such a sinner? Why am I such a bad person? Why can't I just be good? And when I finished graduate school and moved to Portland, I came to manage a small recycling center. That was one of my passions, with music and the environment, and I knew I couldn't make a living at music. My father famously said one day, "Merrill, you're no John Coltrane. You'll enjoy music more if you just do it as an avocation, not vocation." And so I came to Portland, and 6 weeks later, after taking the management role in this recycling center, I was on the floor in the fetal position for 6 weeks. And that was the first time that it didn't get better enough within a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It was the first debilitating time. And the first suicide attempt was on Mount Tabor here in Portland. I was in my 1979 Volkswagen Rapid, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I got to the top of Yamhill Street, pouring rain, and I just floored it as fast as I could. And there's a T and a metal guard and a house. And as I approached that, I, for whatever reason, don't know, slammed on the brakes and skidded to the end of the hill. I've had 4 suicide attempts, and the 3 that followed would have been successful, because I think that's one of the reasons men commit suicide at a rate 4 times more than women, is that we know guns, we know violence, and we know how to make it work. And a lot of women attempt suicide and don't ever get to that point. I can tell you the second time I had done a dress rehearsal, and there were 3 ways that I was going to commit suicide at the same time. And my wife intervened and tapped into some clairvoyant sense of, I need him to raise these 3 daughters. It was not part of the deal, and he can't go. And she actually could see me in her mind's eye hurting myself. I was at the YMCA slicing my wrists open to make sure I could do it. Then I was going to get a lithium shake, which is a 30-day supply of lithium for bipolar, will kill you, shut down your liver. Then I was on my way up to Oneonta Gorge, my favorite spiritual touchstone in the gorge, to fly off the cliff after I'd cut my wrists and drank in the shake and become fish food. And I was in the middle of that, and I came home just to get the shake. And she said, Merrill, what have you been doing? I was just at the gym. I was just at the YMCA. No, at 9 o'clock, you were hurting yourself. And that's one thing to kill yourself or even do the dress rehearsal by yourself. But if someone is watching you, who you really care about, and I had noticed the clock right at 9. And so at that moment, I just kind of shriveled down. And within 24 hours, I was in with my psychiatrist and was basically drugged to the point that I couldn't even move for 30 days.
Now, just quick, do you think that these attempts, the feeling of wanting to commit suicide, do you feel like that was based off of the bipolar coming through, or was it something that you were feeling like not feeling worthy, not feeling love? Like what were the things that were taking you to that place?
A complete sense of failure. I'm worthless. I have all this potential. I have all the things that anyone could ever want in terms of family and support and education, money, whatever and yet I couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't even take a step to do the most simple thing like brush teeth. And so it's all in the same. You can't draw a line and say, well, this is the bipolar part and this is for me, stress almost always leads to downward cycles. And it's stress that makes it impossible to see how I'm going to get through the wall. And I can handle a lot of stress and juggle a lot of balls and do a lot of stuff for a long time. I'm a very manic person when I'm manic, and I can drive people nuts, but at some point there's a cliff. And then it's like a gift to those around you to commit suicide, because you cause so much problems and you mess everything up and you cause people pain, and you just don't want to do that anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And when I lost my brother to suicide, there was no there was a lot of pain with that happening, and there was a lot of guilt, as a survivor of somebody who had committed, where you're looking at what could I have done? Did I not see the signs? Because sometimes people are so normal in their everyday, and then when it becomes a moment of silence for themselves, that's when those decisions or those thoughts creep in, and it's very, alarming for them. But that they go through it, like you said, then obviously that's what's happened. And for me, I never knew exactly why, and I will never have the closure of knowing. It's not like I'll ever get some random letter mailed to me that says this is why. Even the letters that he did leave behind didn't really specifically say why. It was just, you guys are better off without me. Tell my kids I love them. Short and sweet. And it still didn't give any comfort to that. So when you're in that low place, and you start to hear those thoughts and you start to contemplate doing those things, thank God, like you found a moment to stop. So, in those moments of feeling that way, and when, like you were saying, your wife kind of intervened, just having this connection with you, like, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here, that made you stop in that moment to not go further in that day, but were your thoughts still kind of intact with wanting to do that?
Oh, I was still going. And I said, hey, I'm going to go downstairs and watch Harold and Maude, my very favorite movie about suicide. And she says, the hell you are. You're not leaving the room. And it was eventually, in that particular case, where I just yielded from exhaustion. I was just completely exhausted. the two other times, she had again intervened. And so for whatever reason, our paths crossed, and she ended up dying young of ovarian cancer at age 57, almost 5 years ago. And boy, what I would do to be able to trade her places, because
That's
she kept me alive. So I'm on borrowed time, and kind of like you feel this obligation to give back. And the day I heard the word lithium, and in fact heard the word bipolar or manic depression, I'd never heard those words before back in 1987. I felt like I had to get a trumpet out and say, hey, it's not because you're a sinner. It's okay. You're not a sinner. Depression is different than that. This is a sickness. This is an illness. And there are drugs that will help you. And I started telling my story immediately. And the first one was to a class of 27, 17, and 18-year-olds at Wesleyan High School in a psychology class. And when the kids would come up afterwards and say, I have an uncle who, or I have a brother who, or my mom is, or I am, and you get this sense that you've given someone just a modicum of hope, just a little bit of hope, means something. And so I've told this story a million times, ad nauseum, and I'm sure that people around me would hope they never hear it again. But the journey for me ultimately got to the point where I knew, regardless of how depressed I felt at a given moment, I would feel better in the future. That's still not enough to not commit suicide. When you're feeling so dark and in such an enshrouded cave and in a hole so deep that even knowing you'll get out sometime doesn't help, because you don't know when it's going to be. It might be 6 months. I spent 6 months on the floor in the fetal position on the concrete basement house, or in the room in my house, and I listened through the wall to the kids and my wife celebrate Christmas as I pounded my head on the filing cabinet, just saying, why can't I do this? And you just don't want to live anymore. Eventually, in my case, I realized that the pain I would cause others,
yeah.
that pain is even worse than my own pain. And that took a long time to get hold of. And once I did, suicide became less and less interesting and less compelling. And so that's kind of where it is.
So when you look at society, and we, like we said earlier, we notice that men are doing this 4 times higher, right? And it's been decades. It's never changed. It's been the same. And what's interesting to me, and again, I've shared a lot of different of my opinions on my show, saying that I'm not against women by any means, but this is something that we see, but no one's really tapped into it enough to say, okay, what can we do? Because this is sad to see why men are going to that space. And if we notice that breast cancer as an alarming high, we start to see fundraising and different things and people coming and doing walks, and we see this, transformation to help, for cures and different things. And I understand this is kind of a self-inflicted thing, but however, we're seeing it in men. The numbers are there. We're seeing it, in our youth. We're seeing it in our veterans. It's like no man's exempt, but we haven't really tapped in. So give me some of your thoughts on why do you feel, or why you think maybe that men are doing this at the rate that they are? What's going on in men? What's the society doing or twisting men up to feel that way?
I think what you just said is the answer, and that is, why do men feel that way? Men feel that way because we are taught from the womb that we're not supposed to feel things. We're not supposed to express emotions. We're not supposed to emote. It's supposed to be a blank slate, solid, I'm tough, I can handle this. I'm not going to cry. I cried on this podcast 3 times, and I cry anytime I watch McDonald's commercials. I don't fit into that box very well of I'm not an emoter, but I think for the vast majority of men, bottling up emotion and trying to keep a lid on it more often than not results in an explosion.
Yeah, that reminds me of the pop can effect.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. You shake it up.
You shake it, and then you open it. That is that combustion, and it's really sad that why that's taught, or like you said, there are some things that I feel are just naturally wired in you. There's things that are naturally wired in me. I feel like I'm an empath. I'm emotional. I'm sensitive. I want to save the world, and when we get kind of tangled in some of those things, we feel so much. And so if I were to hand you a 10-pound bag of flour and I'm holding the same 10 pounds, we may not feel that yours is heavier than mine, even though it's the same, right? So we all deal with things differently. We express things differently. And with men feeling like they can't open up and do certain things, what are some things that maybe we can learn to help create a space that says we need to have some healthy balance? Because right now it's like if you're tough and you're this and you're that, well, now you're toxic because you're toxic, being masculine. But then if you show some emotion, then there's the whole, maybe they're thinking I'm weak. And so we just have to fight a balance. So what would be maybe some things we can take away on how to balance that out? How to make it okay?
Before we go there, I want to say that as much as we may be taught, that testosterone component creates in our genes the kinds of responses of violence and of aggression and of strength and power. And so I think nobody really knows how much is taught, how much is just the society throwing it on us versus let's look at any other primate or anyone else or the DNA that comes. So there's so many different reasons that I don't want to make it sound that, it's just that in our society we do this. That's not it. How do you deal with not being an emotive person and learn to show emotions? I don't know that I've got answers. I got answers for me. But one of the most important things is isolation and loneliness is the number one killer of people over age 60. And it's worse than smoking cigarettes your whole life or drinking a fifth of vodka every day. It is a very, very dangerous situation. And for me, the most successful thing has been to create a continuous morphing board of directors to deal with whatever issue comes my way. Because I'm so mercurial and I have such highs and such lows, and my perception is so warped because of my illness, I have had to rely on experts, whether that's my wife and my 3 daughters, whether that's a teacher, a mentor, a classmate, a brother, a sister, a father. And so I generally try not to make any important decision without hearing 3 or 4 other people respond to, should I do this or should I not do this? Or what do you think the impact will be if I do this? And more than anything, that has made the key difference. So have a board of directors or have mentors or have outlets, people who can reflect back to you what's going on. And if that is, I'm worthless and I've lost everything and I've totally messed this up to the point that my life is worthless and meaningless, I'm going to kill myself, that's when those people can help. But if you don't have those people in place before you get there, they don't show up. The 1-800 hotlines, I know, save a lot of people, but not enough. Because unless you have that number in your book and someone's given it to you and you know where to find it, it's not there.
That's not where you're going. You're not taking that phone number. You're on a different mission. And it's kind of interesting. I remember, recently I was in my office and I had just finished up suiting up some mannequins and whatnot. And I had gotten a phone call, and a gentleman had said, hey, I don't need a suit. I don't need any resources, but I am going to blow my head off. And I just sat back in my chair, and I didn't know how to handle that. And all I could remember in that moment is just let him get it out. Let him get it out. Let him share. He's feeling very vulnerable. He's crying. He's emotional, and that's okay. And just support that where he's at. And, we stayed on the phone for over an hour, and I wasn't sure if what I was saying or my little bit of advice or my little bit of hope was going to do anything, but he called me. He didn't call the hotline.
Yeah.
And, I was able to kind of share with him, again, what it looks like to be somebody who lost somebody.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful.
So I'm like, look at me just for a minute. Like, what you are about to do will be the ripple effect for everybody forever. I will never have closure. I will never know why. I will be always empty and hurt. And you have to realize that you are here and you're important and you're loved by those people, even if you don't feel loved by yourself in the moments that you're going through something. And so we exchanged, some conversation. And by the time we were about to get off the phone, he said, Nicole, thank you for saving my life. And I was so touched by that. But I'm like, how come I couldn't have done that with Bill? So it's like, even if you have your people and you don't want to burden them.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
But you also want the help to not do something drastic. And so it's just finding that balance and, like you said, finding those people before it's too late, or, having those numbers available, or, again, if that was what Elevate him was in that moment, not just a suit place where you can come get resources and suits and build your confidence, if I'm totally fine with that, because it meant more for me to be able to do what I wanted to do had I known my brother was in that position.
And you never know what you say, how you look at someone, how you hug them, how you walk past and pause. You never know what will be the trigger that matters. And the people person I call my mentors. I call my 3 M's when we're talking about what do I do to stay alive. And one is the people, or my mentors. The second is to have models, that is to have gone through the steps of what I'm going to do the next time I'm in this same situation. And one of the examples that I'd throw out here would be a little saying that I have, which is, never let any person or thing steal my peace. When I do, which I will do, pause, take 3 deep breaths, ponder, and pivot, and reclaim my peace with love. I'm not a road rage guy. I'm a 1-800-phone rage guy, because I just find phone trees that go push 5, 6, 8, 10, and an hour later, I just go nuts. But it's the inability to harness that negative energy that ultimately, at least in my case, causes the cycling to go down the edge of the cliff and off into the bottom. And so can you avoid having the cortisol just shoot up like that and then take 3 days to unplug the brain receptors? I think that's important. The final thing, not just these models of these little things that you practice and you can go to and you've been there and done it, like an athlete who practices things. The last thing for me is what I call having a mission. And when you brought up why couldn't I help my brother, or this is what it's going to feel like, part of my mission, the main reason that my wife 3 times claims that she intervened, is that she needed help raising one of our daughters. Those 2 fought. And I was kind of the saw that evened things out, if you can even imagine that. But that daughter has been my motivation for life. Those times when it's really, really too hard, and a thought of my daughter comes into my head, that I'm here primarily for that reason. That's the mission. So mentors, models, and mission. For me, the 3 M's, that's what does it.
And I think I've shared before, sometimes, life happens and we see divorces and we see family separations and we see, again, kind of the society of the pressure and how to digest a lot of that, how to create something now to be normal when something feels like it's chaos or falling apart. And I try to say to people just, what's your purpose? What are you passionate about? Tap into those things that make you happy instead of focusing on the things that are going wrong, because that's life, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Like you said, there's going to be a moment where you're so dark, but then you give it a little bit more time, a little bit more grace with yourself, and before you know it, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be all right. And you can keep going. And I just try to encourage people, like you said, to be positive, to be in a mindset where this is temporary. I can get through that. Reaching out for help, I know, is hard. We look at medication, and it's so crazy. The commercials that drive me bananas is, how can I take this one pill for my one problem, but I got 50 other things to worry about once I do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of them will be like suicidal thoughts or death. And you're just like, this is what I'm trying not to do.
Yeah.
So how do you look at maybe medicating, where it becomes pros and cons, and how would somebody deal with that if they needed medication to make that decision?
Oh boy, that's a simple question with a simple answer, isn't it? Sorry for the sarcasm. One of the gifts I've had, and I don't know why, I think it may be connected to that desire to reach out to other people and get their feedback, because I didn't trust my own judgment all the time, is that I have never not taken the prescribed medication that I've been told I have to take from a doctor. I've never not taken. There was one year, with my doctor's blessing, that I titrated off and ultimately went into an ultra rapid cycling where every 24 hours I'd go up into the sky and fly away, and then I'd be in the fetal position on the floor again, and that became too exhausting. But those side effects in general are much less worse than the effects of not taking the medication. And there is not a perfect medication, and there are shelves full of average medications and lots of bad medications. And it's a trial and error exercise. But I go back to those models, and one of my models is I take the GDF bad naughty word pills whether I want to or not. You got to brush your teeth, and that's hard to do for me on many nights, and I got to take those pills. And if I can persuade the doctor that there's another path, that's fine. But sometimes you just have to take the medicine and be committed to take it when you know you're not going to want to take it, and have ways to do that.
Now you're making a commitment to yourself.
You're making a commitment to yourself. Make those decisions in advance. That doesn't mean that I don't have a pill box full of woo-woo, wacky-ass, this vitamin, this mineral, this secret sauce, this special whatever. And you try as much as you can, and you keep trying. And if you never give up, you still get a chance to try it again.
Yeah. There might be that one that does move you into that, space where it is a good thing. I know that men in general have talked about, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that, or this is, a fear or whatever. And so those are kind of those things that would come up, is like, how would, somebody openly say I'm on medication? And something that I thought about, because, I work for the airline, and we have to do an annual, they call it a care retreat. And I thought this was really cool. Like, a company comes together, they want their employees to just kind of go off to Seattle and get a little pamper and some, food and meeting and mingling. And I've never been there, so I'm actually going to be going on the 6th. But, I've kind of heard this feedback. And what would you think in a case where, let's say, somebody was, at work and they might have had a trigger or an episode? How would you bring that to an employer? Should employers be able to, should you be able to say, this is what I got going on? in a situation where obviously you're not going to be judged or, fired for anything, but just how would we be able to help somebody in a workplace that might be going through stuff? Because that's kind of scary when men are looking at it. Oh, I'm tough. I got all this stuff. What can I do at work? So I just thought it was interesting to have like that care factor, but there's also the fear factor of I got these medications. I feel this way during the day. I have to work through this. I might have a trigger. I might have an episode. What does that look like? Do you think that would be something that we should promote in workspaces?
Absolutely.
Providing those cares.
Absolutely. Is it easy? No. Will the people who need it most take advantage of it? Generally speaking, no. But are there people on the margin who, just because that exists, at the critical moment, it becomes a trigger to do something and to take a step forward? I think one of the words that you said that pings me the deepest is grace. And by having in a business a grace space where it's okay to say, I'm on medication, or I'm severely mentally ill, I am depressed. That's not easy to do, but giving yourself the grace and being in an environment where it's okay to do that means that good leaders have either experienced mental illnesses or challenges or suicidal thoughts or attempts or ideation, and we need to celebrate that instead of push it under the rug and say, oh, don't feel that.
We don't
or
have this available, so it doesn't exist.
Buck up, or just be positive.
Right.
Just be positive. You've got so much to be thankful for. Oh, that doesn't work. But having a door that's just ajar, that does.
And it rang a bell true to me because, when I get a call and somebody's like, hey, I need some resources, I need a suit, they come in and I do just a really quick intake. It's nothing invasive or crazy. And we spend most of the time talking about where they are. It's almost like free counseling because I'm not a counselor.
And it's not threatening counseling.
Absolutely. And they're just filling out their form, but they're telling me their story. Some men have gotten emotional. Some men have just been like, man, I'm realizing right now how much crap I've been through, and they're getting in touch with those things, and the vulnerability pours out. So it's like, you're not only coming in to get the suit to look good, even though that's part of the building the confidence. I want to see men build their confidence in themselves, find their purpose, find their passions, look good. Men have lost weight and come in and got a different suit, or they got a different job. And what a way to see yourself in a different light, to really start to love and respect yourself.
What simple thing you do and what an impact it has. To me, it's an amazing example of, well, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Or call me if you're feeling depressed next time. And it's like, no, I don't do that when I'm depressed, and that's not going to happen. But you're going to give me a suit?
I'm going to reward you.
You're going to...
We want to make sure that you're in a good space.
That I really applaud you for that, Nicole. That is such a beautiful thing. When my wife was really sick with cancer, and people would come and say, just call me when you need something, or what can I do to help? Didn't work. But those that made the difference, my friend Buck wrote a postcard every week. We did not ask him, well, would you please write a postcard every week and just send a greeting or a card? It's the people who just did things, just tried. However simple, however goofy, or however meaningless it might seem. But the love that goes into that suit, that's the tapestry and the fabric, that's the healing part of it. It's not the cloth, it's the confidence that you're giving that makes all the difference. So bravo to you.
Thank you. No, it was really interesting because my brother wasn't a suit person. He was jeans, t-shirt, button up. I mean, he always dressed nice, but it was very more casual. And when I traveled at the airline, I would go to different places and I would see men in suits. And I'm like, that's sharp. And I would start to get creative with what patterns I would put together. And the more that I saw that, I was like, they walk different. They talk different. Their handshake was more powerful. They had the confidence to walk in a room and turn heads, right? And so when I looked at, you know, the depression part of things, and I'm going through a tough time and we want to just kind of curl up and be in a shell and we don't feel good about ourselves, it was almost like what I created got you to talk about your problems, but then we got to push the suit and put you in position to see how great you looked and how great you are. And we merged those two things together and it became like counseling in a suit. But it's completely transformed the ability of who you are and tapping into those things and reminding yourself, I'm worthy, I'm handsome, I'm strong, I'm all these things. And that's what I wanted to carry out and, eliminate suicide. I mean, that's such a big, dream. Is
Where
that
did
no,
where did the idea for a suit come from? Where was the genesis of that for you?
I think for me, it was, I know when I wear my suit or I wear, nice clothes and we get ourselves put together, I started to pay attention of how people treated me and how, how I felt in my skin. And I remember one time being at the store, and I think I've shared this before, and you go to the store and you look great and they're like, oh, hi, how are you? Just like the greetings and they want to help and service and treat you good, which then makes you feel good. Like, oh, they noticed me or whatever. And then I've gone into the same store with no makeup on, hair a mess, sweatpants, and it's like security camera 5. Like they're on me thinking that I'm stealing. And so it brings a different approach. It makes me feel like crap, like what's wrong with me? So I really wanted to hone in when you look good, you feel good. And that allowed at least a little bit of hope. It just allowed a little bit, because if you put something on and somebody treated you just needed that compliment, or you just needed somebody to give you an opportunity. You go to court, it's not about really your character because they don't know you. You have to show up a certain way. That's just the underline of our crazy world that we live in. You could be the greatest person, but if you look like a certain thing, I'm going to automatically judge you. And I didn't want men to feel judged by what they were going through. I don't want you to look like what you've been through. And so it created this just idea of let's pull it together. Let's show up. Let's show up for ourselves. Let's love ourselves. And I want you to stick around. Don't make that decision.
Yeah. To think that a suit could be at the root of that.
And it's so classic. It'll never go away.
Well, it won't go away, but
you're wearing your Tabasco sauce tie.
I am wearing a Tabasco sauce tie, and I need to get a good suit to fit this. I'm a lot fatter than I used to be, so I think I'm going to set up an appointment to get a better suit.
But you know what I mean? It's just people will recognize and remember moments. And I know it's not like I play dress up. Some people might think, oh, Nicole plays dress up, and it's just, you're very small-minded to the big mind that I have, the big passion and purpose that I see that could be rewarding for somebody. And this isn't just men. And I have youth. There was a young boy that I suited not too long ago. He didn't have the means or the attire to go to homecoming. And, he's maybe got some things going on at home. Maybe he's feeling the pressure of sports and peers. And so we got him suited and he got to go. And it was just a moment that he's going to remember, an opportunity. So that was my drive. That was my power. And I wanted to create that longevity. So hopefully we'll, stick around and keep going, and we'll get people to see that it is important, and it's tied into mental health. And it's what they call it non-therapeutic, because you have no therapy, you have no counselor, you have no medication. This is just strictly you working on you in a moment of opportunity.
Well, I hope you keep this up, because just hearing this story gives me all sorts of ideas about what other kinds of suits are just sitting right in front of me. Whether it's a smile that I always do, or something I say to people, find a path and do it, and you just never know how it's going to bear fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been very amazing. So yeah, just if there are opportunities, you mentioned earlier when we talked, do you have you have background of like business, and obviously you have, people and connections and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on, what would you advise me to do to be able to reach more men who might be struggling or might need it but don't know how, like where I'm at? How can we get more people involved to at least know about Elevate Him?
I was at a hotel down in Bandon, Oregon over the weekend, and I asked that question when I was leaving because I had such a wonderful experience at the Bandon Inn, and I said, do you have a Google card? Do you have something I can, if I was to say something nice where I'd like to go? And the woman immediately handed me a trip plan. Not trip letter, trip.
Trip. Yeah, I know what you're talking about because I just did one too.
TripAdvisor. Okay. It's just the card right there, and there's the QR code. There's just so easy to make that step. And I'm wondering if you have cards that go in every suit, and there's 10 cards that go in the suit, and that if I got a suit, you know what? I got this from this cool lady named Nicole, and I think those little card things, that's one thing that to me, if it's in the hand and ready to go the second someone says, oh gosh, you look nice. Oh, well, I'm paying it forward. Check this out because you might get the same benefit out of it.
Yeah. No, that's great because I'm still I'm still growing. I'm still seeing a vision. My next step, is I want to do a conference. I want to do a conference, and I want it to be hundreds of people, and I want it to be, different people coming and speaking. So I would love to connect with you again and maybe have you come share your story another time because I would love to continuously hear your growth and where you are and how you're doing. And I just think that you are so impactful just by sharing your story. And it takes a lot to be here to share in itself. But I'm very blessed and thankful to know you and actually having you physically here.
Thank you, Nicole. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that a lot. Made it easy to speak and feel comfortable as well.
Yeah. So I would love to have you back. And like I said, maybe when we do something on the next, what would elevate myself into something, I want you to be a part of it. So
I'd be honored. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for checking out Elevate Him podcast. It's been an awesome time, and we will see you next. Bye.